So here we have the text structure and purpose questions as they are categorized by the Khan Academy and College Board. Also includes questions about functions of underlined sentences. But to preview the questions, we've got this one, this one, this one. So several that ask about the main purpose. Then we get into the overall structure. Again, the overall structure. Again, the overall structure. And then onto the underlined sentences. And that is that. So 10 questions, and let's get to it here. So number one, the following is adapted from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. The narrator is reflecting on an incident with Miss Reed, her aunt and guardian, and we need to know the main purpose. Okay, so a child cannot quarrel with its elders, his or her elders, as I had done, cannot give its furious feelings uncontrolled play, as I had given mine, without experiencing afterwards the pang of remorse and the chill of reaction. Something of vengeance I had tasted for the first time. As aromatic wine it seemed, on swallowing, warm and racy. So it's kind of like tasting the taste of vengeance. It was a good taste at first. Its after flavor, metallic and corroding, gave me a sensation as if I had been poisoned, so not such a good aftertaste. Willingly would I now have gone, so I now would have gone willingly and asked Mr. Reed's pardon, her forgiveness, but I knew that was the way to make her repulse me with double scorn, thereby re-exciting every turbulent impulse of my nature. So, in a couple of words, she is expressing regret. And let me select a different color than, let's go with green. Okay, expressing regret for her actions. And how about that with A, to show Jane's regret. And so, so always want to be thinking as we're reading, summarize it, and then go to the answer choices. If you don't want to write down your summary, that's okay. I know that it's not easy to write things down on in the Blue Book app. You'd have to write it down on paper, and you probably want to save your paper for the math, or at least the more complex verbal questions. But anyway, it's not to portray her as a rebellious and angry child who deserves punishment. Maybe she does deserve it, but that's not the purpose of this. It's not about complex feelings, and it's not about the source of resentment. It is about regret, remorse, and that's that. Number two, again, the main purpose. In his novel, The Savage Detectives, Chilean author Roberto Bolaño depicts a group of bohemian poets, so bohemian sort of artisty, countercultural poets who are pushing the boundaries of artistic expression. The novel is loosely based on the infrarealist poetry movement, and that's certainly not a word anyone would be expected to know. Infrarealist poetry movement. That Bolaño was a part of in Mexico City in the 1970s. Like the real-life infrarealists, the characters in The Savage Detectives are often in conflict with the mainstream literary establishment. While the novel is fictional, its resemblance to the real movement offers a revealing glimpse in that period. Okay, so it's describing a novel. Okay, that's not going to be enough to get us to our answer, but that's enough, I think, to just say, okay, the purpose of it is to describe this novel. And more importantly, its relation to real events. And how about that? To argue that. Okay, so I said describe, but it does argue at the end. It makes the argument here. It still offers a revealing glimpse into that period of Latin American literary history, even though it is fictional. But let's check the others. No, it's not examining the conflicts. It mentions in passing that these two things exist, but that's as far as it goes. It's not explaining how poetry evolved. D might be tempting if one were to just casually read the passage, but it's not really talking about his literary achievements in general. It's talking about this one book and its impact, or not even its impact. The fact that it portrays that period. So it's not having it probably did have an impact, or maybe it did, but it's not saying here that it did. It's saying that it is documenting previous history. More Literature. Okay, so poet so-and-so started inviting other writers who, like him, were Nuyorican. Only because I've heard that do I know how to pronounce it. So Nuyorican, a term for New Yorkers of Puerto Rican heritage. That is, yeah. I think you would call this this is a side note, a portmanteau, which is a word that is constructed out of multiple other words. And perhaps some of the spelling is modified. Portmanteau is itself a French word. I don't know how it breaks down, but anyway, that is a side note. So they were Nuyorican, and he invited others to gather in his apartment to present their work. The gatherings were so well attended that he soon had to rent space in a cafe to fit them all in, to accommodate them. Thus, the Nuyorican Poets Cafe was born. Moving to a permanent location in 1981, the Nuyorican Poets Cafe expanded its original scope beyond the written word, hosting art exhibitions and musical performances as well. It continues to foster, they love that word, support emerging Nuyorican artists. So, history of Nuyorican Poets Cafe. Goals and history. Okay. A is tempting. But if we look up at the beginning, we see that what motivated him to found it. I mean, it's not really getting into the motivation. I mean, he started inviting people to present their work, and then they had to rent space. Maybe. We could say maybe. I think we can, I'd like to think there's something better. To situate the Nuyorican Poets Cafe within the cultural life of New York as a whole. Well, no, because it's not talking about New York as a whole. It just mentions New York, but it's not talking about, to situate something is to place it in context, but it's not talking about what others were doing in New York at the same time or how this related. To explain why it expanded its scope, no, it doesn't say why. It just mentions that it did. To provide an overview of the founding and mission of the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. Okay, so A versus D. The founding of the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. The founding of the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. They're kind of similar. That means we need to focus on the parts of them that are different to explain what motivated as opposed to providing an overview. Well, I think this is more of an overview. Because if we look at the last couple of sentences, we see that the last three sentences do not even mention him. Okay, the first two sentences do, but the last three don't. So I think the important thing here is that it is about the Nuyorican Poets Cafe more so than it is his motivations. Because again, we don't have anything other than the fact that he started inviting them and that they ran out of space in his apartment. But that's not really motivations in a broader sense. So that one should be D. 4. Composer Florence Price won first prize for her score Symphony in E minor. At these awards, the piece was performed the following year by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, a significant recognition of its quality. Price continued to compose many musical pieces throughout her career, blending traditional black spirituals with classical European romantic musical traditions. In recent years, Price's concertos and symphonies have been performed and recorded by several major orchestras, further preserving her work for others to enjoy. So, the musical career of Florence Price, something like that. To describe the musical styles, no, it mentions in passing some of the styles or traditions, but it doesn't say what inspired them. To provide examples of Price's importance as a composer, well, quality, importance, award, symphonies, major orchestras. That seems good. It's definitely not arguing that more should perform it, and is not comparing. So that would be B, to provide examples of Price's importance as a composer. So-and-so, a historian of the citizen of the Choctaw Nation, a Native American tribe, has identified a dilemma inherent to research, a dilemma that accompanies research, that comes along with the mere fact of doing research on the status of women in her tribe during the 1600s and 1700s. Namely, the primary sources from that era, travel narratives and other accounts by male European colonizers, underestimate the degree of power conferred on Choctaw women. Male European colonizers underestimate the degree of power conferred on Choctaw women by their traditional roles in political, civic, and ceremonial life. Okay, they underestimate how much power these women had in various aspects of tribal life. This author argues that the Choctaw oral tradition and findings from archaeological sites in the tribe's homeland supplement the written record by providing crucial insights into these roles. Okay, so non-written evidence is important to in terms of righting the wrongs committed by these horrible male European colonizers. So it details the shortcomings of certain historical sources, then argues the research should avoid that. No, it does allude to the shortcomings, but it doesn't argue that they should avoid those male European colonizers altogether, just that they should supplement them with these other things. B, it describes a problem that arises in research on a particular topic, then sketches a historian's approach to addressing that problem. It lists the advantages of a particular research method, then it's not listing the advantages of a method that gets criticized. It characterizes a particular topic as especially challenging to research, then suggests no, it's not doing that. Yep. Describes a problem, and then a potential or partial solution. 6. In the Here and Now storybook, this educator advanced the then controversial, I would like to see a hyphen there, then controversial idea that books for very young children should imitate how they use language. Since toddlers, who cannot yet grasp narrative or abstract ideas, seek reassurance in verbal repetition and naming. Okay. So the most enduring example of this idea is Margaret Wise Brown's 1947 picture book, Goodnight Moon, in which a young rabbit names the objects in his room as he drifts off to sleep. Scholars note that the book's emphasis on repetition, rhythm, and nonsense rhyme speaks directly to Mitchell's influence. Okay, so we have an educator putting forth an idea that was initially considered controversial, but then we have a book that actually used those ideas. So controversial ideas put into practice. Ideas later put into practice. Put into practice meaning, utilized in the writing of this book, or inspiring to some extent the name of this book. Maybe it speaks to Mitchell's influence. Okay. The text summarizes an argument about how children's literature should be evaluated. Nope. It's not talking about how it should be evaluated, and that's enough to eliminate A. It outlines a debate between two authors. Nope, I don't see a debate. Nope. That's enough to get rid of that. Lists the literary characteristics that are common to many classics of children's literature. No. It presents a philosophy about what material is most suitable for children's literature, a controversial idea, and then describes a book influenced by that philosophy. D will be our answer here. Seven, using NASA's powerful James Webb Telescope, so-and-so measured the wavelengths of light traveling through the atmosphere of this planet outside our solar system. And we're not going to get bogged down in WASP 39b. Okay, so different molecules absorb different wavelengths of light, and the wavelength measurements showed the presence of carbon dioxide in this planet's atmosphere. The finding not only offers the first decisive evidence of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of an exoplanet, but also illustrates the potential for future scientific breakthroughs. Okay. A significant finding plus future possibilities. I mean, that's very, very rough, but really when summarizing, it's just like you don't want to pause really too long and try to find the right word. Just get something down. Very different from actually writing and editing and something that you would be communicating with other people. Even though I am attempting to communicate this with you, the idea is when you make any kind of notes or summarize to yourself, you don't need to worry about how other people might understand it. It's just to get something down. Okay, the overall structure, it outlines the steps taken in a scientific study. No, it doesn't. It does not. That's enough to get rid of that. I also don't think it presents a hypothesis. It discusses a method used by some... No, it's not talking about alternative methods. It examines how a group of scientists reached a conclusion. No. It describes how researchers made a scientific discovery, then explains the importance of that discovery. So we could see there. It was a little rough, but discovery is a finding, or a finding is a discovery, and then illustrates the potential for future scientific breakthroughs. Well, that's the importance. It says, hey, there's potential to do more. 8. Archaeological and the function. Okay, so on to this type of question. Archaeological excavation of the Market Street Chinatown, a 19th century Chinese American community in San Jose, California, provided the first evidence that Asian food products were imported to the United States in the 1800s. Bones from a freshwater fish species native to Southeast Asia. Okay. I'm not sure what the asterisk is doing there, and I don't know if I captured that. But anyway, so what's going on in this sentence? It's a long sentence, but they dug up some stuff and found bones from this freshwater species. Okay, so I'm just going to say, even though this is really general characterization, but just to say that that's background. That's background information. And we could say background about archaeological finding. Okay, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. But these Hong Kong-based import-export firms likely coordinated the fish's transport from Chinese-operated fisheries in Vietnam and Malaysia to North American markets. Okay, so likely means it's not definite. So we could say this is a hypothesis about how the fish got there, which means it's a hypothesis that potentially explains the source of this archaeological finding. This route reveals the often overlooked multinational dimensions of the trade networks linking Chinese diaspora communities. And diaspora is related to like dispersed, spread out. So the Chinese diaspora communities would be Chinese communities in different parts of the world. Okay, so the function of the underlying sentence is that does it provide information that helps support a claim? Maybe. B, it explains why efforts to determine... No, it does not do that. It outlines a hypothesis that additional evidence discussed in the... Okay, it does outline a hypothesis to a certain extent, but the following sentence does not cast doubt on it. The following sentence does something different. It doesn't cast doubt. It traces the steps that were taken to locate and recover. No, it doesn't do that. Okay, I wouldn't have, I didn't jump on this one as being obviously absolutely correct, but it helps support a claim about this significance. Okay, they're saying that it was significant. And then here, it helps support that claim in the sense that The significance has to do with the multinational dimensions of these trade networks. In other words, it wasn't just coming from China to the U.S. Instead, we've got Hong Kong, Vietnam, Malaysia, etc. So multiple nations or communities in terms of this network. And so, yeah, that would be that. Again, I don't love that, but it's going to have to be the correct answer. Number 9, people, again, the function of the underlined sentence, people whose desire is solely for self-realization, to realize or to make real one's goals or ambitions or dreams, never know where they are going. They can't know. In one sense of the word, it is, of course, necessary to know oneself. That is the first achievement of knowledge. But to recognize that the soul of man is unknowable is the ultimate achievement of wisdom. I would say you don't technically need that comma there, but I guess it's for clarity's sake that, Okay, the final mystery is oneself. When one has weighed the sun in the balance and measured the steps of the moon and mapped out the 7 heavens star by star, there still remains oneself. Who can calculate the orbit of his own soul? Okay, so the function there, I think, is to, in a literary way, using some figurative language, metaphorical language, to emphasize a previous point. Emphasize a point about the difficulty of self-knowledge. It doesn't caution readers that the directions are hard to follow. Again, often, I've mentioned this in other videos, but when you have a literary passage, a poem, or literary writing like this, you want to be wary of the real superficial, literal type answers. Yes. It concedes that the definition of... No, it doesn't concede that at all. It reinforces or emphasizes the text's skepticism about the possibility of truly achieving self-knowledge. Okay, if the point is that it's difficult to achieve self-knowledge, then it is being skeptical about that possibility. And so that will be correct. But D, it speculates that some readers will share the doubts. It doesn't do that. Yeah, it reinforces. So as we're reading, we really just take stock of what's going on, because we know with function questions that the function is going to be important, and to know the function of the underlined sentence, we need to be keeping track of the functions of the sentences that surround it, or in this case, the sentences that precede it. And then one more short little bit here. So the following text is from Joseph Conrad's The Secret Agent, A Simple Tale. Mr. Verloc is... I feel like there should have been a break in between those. Mr. Verloc is navigating the streets of London, the London streets, on his way to a meeting. Before reaching Knightsbridge, he took a turn to the left out of the busy main thoroughfare, uproarious with the traffic. So like an uproar, it's characterized by an uproar of traffic, a loud, I don't know, hubbub. That's not the best word. Of traffic, of swaying omnibuses and trotting vans. An omnibus is just some kind of a bus. In the almost silent, swift flow of horse-drawn carriages. I've never seen that word in my life. Under his hat, worn with a slight backward tilt, his hair had been carefully brushed into respectful sleekness. As a conjunction here, for his business was with an embassy, and Mr. Verloc, steady like a rock, a soft kind of rock, marched now along a street which could with every propriety be described as private. Okay, so this is just an underlined phrase, not a whole sentence. So it was steady like a rock, a soft kind of rock. Well, it specifies or gets more specific about a kind of comparison. I mean, like a rock, that would be a simile. So he was steady like a rock, but a soft kind of rock. What does that mean? I guess he's not like a boulder or a hard rock. But I don't know what that means. Steady but soft. It's not contrasting him with his surroundings. I don't see how you can get anything about an internal struggle or a private opinion. So it qualifies it. Now, the issue with this for some students, I imagine, would be that you see qualifies and you think like, oh, if I get this certificate, or if I take this class and pass it, that qualifies me to do this other thing, like qualifications. And that is certainly a meaning of qualify, but here it's being used as a synonym of specify. To qualify is to get more specific about. And what else can I say about that? That's how it's being used here. So this would be an example of how, vocabulary, even on a question like this, can be really important, because if you get to the answer choices and you don't know the meaning of a word, or you know the meaning of the word in one context, but you're not sure how it can be used in this context, or you misread it, that can be a problem too. So, yes, but questions, comments, leave them below. Otherwise, that'll do it for this video.